Brilliant guy, but I usually don't do good and evil. When you're talking about your enemy, I don't think it's helpful. I think it colors your judgment. This guy was the definition of evil. He was an evil man.
Can you describe some of the stuff?
Well, the most dramatic one is this missionary, Kayla Mueller, American missionary trying to help out over there, was kidnapped, and she became his, basically slave.
The story of modern terrorism cannot be told without mentioning Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the sinister leader of the Islamic State, whose image became a symbol of brutality and barbarism. Since proclaiming a caliphate in 2014, al-Baghdadi embodied terror, oppression, and violence. He carried out mass executions and public beheadings, imposed ethnic cleansing, sexual slavery, and destroyed historical sites. It is hard to imagine how a single human being could cause so much agony. In 2019, the United States elite unit carried out an epic and daring operation outside the city of Barisha, Syria, to end his reign of horror. In this military force video, we will explore how Delta Force, the US military's Special Operations Group, dismantled the empire of terror led by this man in a dramatic assault that would mark a milestone in the global fight against extremism. Let's begin.
Hey, mortars are going too. Yeah. Mortars are going too.
There they go.
Nice shot, bro.
The early morning of October 27, 2019, marked a defining moment in the global fight against terrorism. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, leader of the jihadist group Islamic State, or ISIS, was the primary target of a complex and risky military operation carried out in the northeast by Syria's Delta Force. Al-Baghdadi had been the most wanted man in the world, and his elimination would be a monumental blow to the group he led. This mission would mean not only the end of a man who symbolized the brutality of ISIS, but also a strategic triumph in the fight against global terrorism. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, whose real name was Ibrahim Awad Ibrahim al-Badri, was born in 1971 in the city of Samarra, north of Baghdad, Iraq. He came from a Sunni family and reportedly considered himself a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad through the Quraysh tribe. Al-Baghdadi studied Islamic theology at the Islamic University of Baghdad, which provided him with a religious foundation that he would later use to justify ISIS's brutal actions. Baghdadi joined the Iraqi insurgency following the US invasion of Iraq in 2003. He rose quickly through the ranks of insurgent and terrorist groups, and in 2010 assumed leadership of what was then known as the Islamic State of Iraq. With the civil war in Syria in 2011, Baghdadi expanded the operations of his group, known for its radical interpretation of Islam and heinous acts of violence.
أمانة ثقيلة فوليت عليكم ولست بخيركم ولا أفضل منكم فإن رأيتموني على حق فأعينوني وإن رأيتموني على باطل فانصحوني وسددوني.
In 2014, al-Baghdadi declared the establishment of a caliphate in ISIS-controlled areas of Syria and Iraq, proclaiming himself Caliph Ibrahim. Under his leadership, the group came to control large areas of both countries, imposing a reign of terror characterized by mass executions, sexual slavery, and unprecedented brutality. Baghdadi was responsible for inspiring and orchestrating numerous terrorist attacks in Europe, the United States, and elsewhere, becoming a symbol of global jihadist extremism. His fanatics with blind faith gave everything for him.
This is crazy, crazy stuff. He's high on adrenaline, maybe something else. One of the men uses his radio to urge other fighters on.
If we are going to talk about the capture of al-Baghdadi, it is impossible not to mention Chris Miller, one of those figures who seem to emerge from the shadows at the most decisive moments. In November 2020, he was appointed acting US Secretary of Defense, taking the reins of the Pentagon during a time of great uncertainty. As a member of the Special Forces, Miller was involved in some of the most important military missions in recent US history. This official had been following al-Baghdadi for some time. He knew all the crimes he committed, from torture to sexual submission practices. Among his victims was Kayla Muller, an American humanitarian worker who had been captured by ISIS.
But it was barbaric. You take the worst thing you could imagine, and he was doing that to Kayla Muller. We did an operation to go in there one night to get her. She was not there. When I say that, our counterterrorism forces did. Man, it was a hell of a fight. It was epic.
Al-Baghdadi was not just a leader, he was a symbol of evil that challenged the world order. His elimination represented a crucial opportunity to dismantle ISIS, which had inspired a wave of terrorist attacks globally. The United States could not afford to let this monster continue to lurk in the shadows. Uncle Sam's country was offering a $25 million reward for any information leading to his capture or death, placing him on a par with Osama bin Laden in terms of importance to the fight against terrorism. Despite continued attempts to locate him, al-Baghdadi managed to evade international forces for several years, moving constantly through conflict zones and using a network of loyal followers to hide. However, in the weeks leading up to this key operation, American intelligence received information about his location. The report on al-Baghdadi's whereabouts was obtained through the collaboration of various intelligence sources. Turkey, one of the key players in the region, provided crucial data on his location 48 hours before the mission. In addition, Iraqi and Syrian Kurds, who had worked closely with US forces in the fight against ISIS, also contributed to the identification of the terrorist leader's hideout. The head of the Islamic State was hiding in the village of Barisha in the province of Idlib, a region in northwestern Syria. Even though Idlib was under the control of groups opposed to ISIS, al-Baghdadi had managed to find refuge in that remote area, taking advantage of the chaos and fragmentation of the various factions operating there. His hideout, a compound on the outskirts of the village, was well fortified and guarded, making any military operation against him difficult. The air in the White House crisis room was thick with tension. For days, analysts had been gathering information. Each piece of intelligence was a brick in the building of a plan that would lead to the capture or death of the ISIS leader. After years of eluding capture, news of his location in Barisha was like a flash of light in the darkness. When the location was confirmed, the time to act had come.
So the assault force picks up right away. The chairman says something like, "I hope this isn't the start of World War III."
On October 27, 2019, after weeks of planning and analysis, Delta Force, an elite special operations unit of the United States Army, carried out the mission to eliminate al-Baghdadi. At 2 a.m., a select group of between 50 and 70 men from the Delta Force and the U.S. Army Rangers were ready to take off from Erbil, in Iraqi Kurdistan. The mission was secret, and the air vibrated with the adrenaline of the impending assault. Black Hawk helicopters soared through the air. The soldiers knew they were about to enter history. The air deployment was one of the most delicate moments of the operation, as it involved flying over territory controlled by various forces and militias, including troops from Russia. The country led by Putin was informed in advance about the operation that would be carried out in the region, although no specific details were given to maintain secrecy. The helicopters flew for about an hour towards the target, covering a considerable distance and avoiding several risk areas.
He had built out like a fighting position slash safe room in the back. They're like, oh no, he's here, and yeah, there are 3 women here. And the only way we're gonna get this done is gonna have to put some commandos in here to dig him out and kill his ass, right?
As the helicopters landed in the darkness of the night, time stood still. With each step, the tension mounted. The commandos, trained to face the worst, moved stealthily towards the compound where al-Baghdadi was being held. At that instant, the entire world did not know that its history was about to change forever. The silence was broken by the roar of gunfire and explosions. An initial bombardment served as a distraction and disorientation for the jihadists defending the site. The operation unfolded like a storm. Bullets flew and explosions thundered, creating chaos that resembled an action movie.
Hey, get in the fucking fight! Let's go! Start shooting!
Once in the area, the initial bombardment of al-Baghdadi's compound lasted for about an hour, weakening the defenses and preparing the ground for the assault. The American commandos entered the compound shortly after the airstrike and began clearing the buildings, facing resistance from the jihadist fighters guarding the terrorist leader's hideout. During this combat, several were killed by the American forces.
Bunch of women and kids start streaming out. Like, I can't remember how many, like 20 of them come streaming out of this house. Translators and interpreters are like, what's going on? Is Baghdadi? And they're like, oh yeah, he's in there. He's in there. He's got a suicide vest on, and he's got 3 women with him that are also his wives, one of which was like 14 or something. You know, can you believe this? Can you believe that?
Al-Baghdadi, aware of the imminent danger, tried to escape through a tunnel that led to his safety. But the hiding place became his prison. The pursuit of the American commandos pushed him towards the abyss of his destiny. The adrenaline was palpable, and the tension could be cut with a knife. Seeing himself cornered, the ISIS leader made a desperate decision. He activated his explosive vest and blew himself up, taking 3 of his children with him. The explosion resonated in the darkness of the night, and the echoes of what happened spread throughout the village.
You can see explosions going off, and you're like, oh man, this is the fatal funnel, you know? Nothing we can do about it. Let's see what happens. About not too much later, the report comes back. Yep, suspect or whatever, you know, the target detonated himself, and we're now going to collect DNA to see if it was him.
American commandos, having been assured that the immediate danger had passed, began searching the compound. What they found was devastating chaos. Al-Baghdadi's body was mutilated by the explosion, and although lives had been lost in the process, American forces had not suffered significant casualties. The terrorist leader was one of the few survivors of the initial clashes, leading to a manhunt in the underground tunnels where he eventually met his fate.
The target that you were going after is either captured or killed. And he would not call jackpot, even though we know it's Baghdadi, right? It's like not calling jackpot. Finally, the 4-star commander that's overseeing the operation, this guy's General McKenzie, he calls and goes, ground force commander is not going to call jackpot right now, but he assesses with a strong degree of confidence that the target has been killed.
The world was about to learn of the success of the mission. Within hours of the confrontation, then-President Donald Trump headed to Syria. In a triumphant tone, he revealed the details of the operation, making it clear that the man who had sown terror from the shadows for years no longer posed a threat. The mission had been a resounding victory, one that would resonate in the hearts of many, and which meant a crushing defeat for ISIS. These were the words of the American president, who would later describe the scene in a tone with a mixture of triumph and horror. A coward died, whimpering, crying, screaming. When the suicide vest detonated, the explosions caused the tunnel to partially collapse, but American forces managed to recover the remains of the terrorist to carry out the necessary tests to confirm his identity. Despite the severity of the detonation, al-Baghdadi's face remained relatively intact, allowing for his initial identification. DNA tests were subsequently carried out to confirm that he was indeed the ISIS leader, confirming his identity at 100%. In addition to al-Baghdadi, 2 of his wives were also found in the compound, both wearing explosive vests that failed to detonate.
Chairman, do you want to know what the task force name was? Because usually they just come up with some number, right? Task Force 52-9 or what the hell it was. We're like, yeah, sure. They go, they named it after Kaylan Mueller.
The death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was a crucial milestone in the fight against ISIS. His disappearance left the jihadist group without its charismatic leader, without the man who had orchestrated the expansion of the caliphate in Syria and Iraq. While ISIS had already lost most of its territory by 2019, al-Baghdadi remained a symbol of resistance for his followers and an operational leader who still had the ability to coordinate attacks and mobilize terrorist cells in different parts of the world. Following the operation, the US government under President Donald Trump received international praise for its success in eliminating one of the most dangerous criminals on the planet. Trump, whose government had been criticized for its decision to withdraw US troops from Syria, used the success of the mission to highlight the effectiveness of American military forces and justify his decisions in the region. However, the operation also sparked controversy when it was revealed that Trump did not previously brief House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leaders about the mission, arguing that he wanted to maintain secrecy due to leaks in the government. Finally, al-Baghdadi's death is a reminder that the fight against terrorism is an ongoing effort that requires not only military action, but also political, economic, and social strategies to address the problems that allow extremism to flourish. As the world celebrates the fall of a terrorist leader, it must remain vigilant and committed to building a future in which violent extremism has no place in society.
Anyone that was still alive, that was ISIS, they came in, the leadership came in and executed them for not dying with their commanders. But it allowed us to look into, holy shit, they're moving tons of money.
The darkness of the night is the ally of the Delta Force in the hostile territory of Syria. 24 elite American soldiers embark on a high-impact mission to capture, dead or alive, one of the leaders of the feared Islamic State. The enemy is the most important piece in the illegal oil and gas trafficking that finances the group's operations. But he is not only dedicated to filling the accounts of the terrorist organization with money, but is also the main target for the kidnapping and torture of Kaylan Mueller, a young humanitarian worker of American origin. His name is Abu Sayyaf, one of the most wanted men of ISIS. In this new video from Military Force, we will learn all the details of the brutal operation carried out by the United States Special Forces to catch him. If you want to know what the bloody path to this battle was like, then put on your bulletproof vest and join us on this adventure.
To go after Abu Sayyaf, and he was the last one that had Kayla Mueller being held and like raping her, and it was just disgusting, man.
The Islamic State, also known as ISIS, was born as an offshoot of the al-Qaeda terrorist organization in Iraq. After the death of one of its leaders in 2006, it adopted its current name and sought to gain a place in the war against the West. However, the presence of US forces in the region weakened the insurgent group. However, in 2011, when US troops withdrew and instability in the area sparked the Syrian civil war, the organization saw its opportunity to re-emerge. Under the leadership of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, it expanded and consolidated its influence thanks to the ease with which it was able to sow terror and chaos. It infiltrated Syrian territory in 2013, taking advantage of the collapse of government control in large parts of the country and the fragmentation of rebel forces. ISIS quickly began to capture major cities and became a global threat for the ferocious atrocities it commits in the name of religion and its hatred of the West. The region became a hell. In August 2013, Kayla Mueller came to see it for herself. The young American woman arrived in the Syrian city of Aleppo with her boyfriend, who had been hired to install communications equipment at a Doctors Without Borders hospital. She was a humanitarian worker from Turkey, where she was helping refugees. However, noticing that the area was dangerous for foreigners and especially for Americans, the health aid agency she worked for decided to return her to Turkish soil. The day after her arrival in Iraq, a vehicle passed by to take her to the bus station, but she never reached her destination. On the way, she was intercepted by soldiers of the Islamic State.
My name is Kayla Mueller. I need your help. It's very terrifying here.
Their 24-year-old daughter, Kayla, was in the hands of one of the most brutal terror groups the world has ever known, ISIS.
You just go into almost a catatonic state, I think. You just can't even stand up.
After her abduction, Kayla Mueller spent approximately 18 months in confinement. During her captivity, she was tortured and abused by ISIS members, including Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the group's leader. She was forced to be their sex slave. The young Arizona native was alone for a time, but later shared a cell with 3 other women. 2 of them, Frida Said and Patricia Chavez, were eventually released and shared details of their tragic confinement. The conditions in which they lived were deplorable. They saw no sunlight, there was no hygiene, and they suffered constant assaults from their captors. However, both survivors emphasized the hatred that ISIS men had for Kayla in particular.
I think it was clear that they hated Americans. They would scream at her and they would, blame her for everything that America has done in the world.
Back in Arizona, Kayla's parents held out hope that ISIS would treat an aid worker gently, that one of the humanitarian groups she was connected to would help negotiate her freedom. But that did not happen.
No one would claim her, so they assumed she was a spy.
Whatever the excuse, the young girl became the victim of the worst and most feared practices of the Islamic State. In addition to the sexual abuse suffered by al-Baghdadi, she was also tormented by another of the terrorist organization's top leaders. This is where the ruthless Abu Sayyaf comes in, responsible for inflicting not only physical pain, but also psychological torture by exploiting Kayla's greatest fears. The uncertainty about her final fate weighed on her mind, but she often found herself at the limits of her tolerance and wished for it all to be over once and for all. Death as a means to end the suffering is a scenario that her parents try to avoid, although they are aware that it could be the only alternative. Although they tried hard to publicize Kayla's condition in order to convince the government to enter into talks, that never came to fruition. ISIS demanded a large sum of money in exchange for her release, which was impossible given American policies. There is no negotiation with terrorists.
We found out that her fingernails had been pulled out. Her hair had been shaved, and that she had been tortured.
And the prospect of a negotiated release grew increasingly unlikely as the Muellers found themselves up against the U.S. policy not to make concessions to terrorists.
I firmly believe that the United States government paying ransom to terrorists risks endangering more Americans and funding the very terrorism that we're trying to stop.
Finally, in February 2015, members of the Islamic State announced that Kayla Mueller had died during a bombing by Jordanian forces. However, the exact nature of her death was never revealed. The young woman's tragic story highlighted the dangers faced by humanitarian workers in conflict zones and also the brutal treatment that ISIS gives to its prisoners. Her memory has been honored through various organizations and campaigns that seek to continue her legacy of helping those most in need in war-torn regions. The U.S. government believed that the best way to honor her would be to go after those responsible for her terrible end. And so the hunt began. The first target? Abu Sayyaf. Despite being known by that name, this senior ISIS commander was actually called Fadil Ahmad al-Hayali. In addition to playing an important role in the kidnapping and captivity of Kayla Mueller, he had other key tasks within the terrorist group. He was primarily responsible for overseeing the organization's financial operations, such as oil and gas trafficking, which provided significant funding to the Islamic State. For these reasons, he became a high-value target for the Americans. On May 16, 2015, U.S. Special Forces prepared a raid to catch him. According to intelligence work, he would be in a building located in eastern Syria. But he would not be alone, so the operation would be extremely dangerous. The Army decided to entrust this task to the Delta Force, one of the best units in the service of the United States. 24 soldiers belonging to this force prepared to leave for their destination in the early hours of the morning. From the command room, the final order was heard: go. The aircraft were already on and warming up their engines when the fighters launched themselves inside. 2 Black Hawk helicopters and several V-22 planes began their flight in the darkness of the night. The target was a residential building in Deir ez-Zor, so it would be difficult to go unnoticed. However, the element of surprise and speed would be key to the success of the operation. For that reason, the aircraft arrived quickly, flying low between the structures of the city. Before they could stop, the soldiers had already jumped out to begin their first task, blowing up the doors to enter the complex. But before that, they had their own surprise in the streets.
The Delta Force fighters engaged in gunfire with ISIS soldiers defending the outside of the building. After blowing a hole in the side of the multi-story building, U.S. soldiers entered through the opening.
A group of commandos acted in a perfectly synchronized manner to enter the building. However, the fighters who had to face the insurgents were delayed for a moment. Part of the wall of the structure was blown away by the detonations caused by the explosives of the first soldiers entering. But the stragglers had to place new charges to allow a better passage of the troops. With adrenaline running through their veins and weapons ready, the Delta Force moved quickly. They knew that the enemy was very dangerous, so the operation had to be fast and precise. However, there are no guarantees when fighting against a force like ISIS. While one of the Americans took position to place the new explosives, a jihadist fighter appeared fiercely through the hole left by the first American group. Thousandths of a second separated him from encountering an unprotected Delta commando. The entire scene was observed by Kyle Morgan, one of the soldiers who was a few meters from the imminent confrontation.
And I see this guy, a shadowy figure kind of through, I could see from, I was on like the halfway down on the stairs, and I could see into the apartment after the door blew open. And, you know, the breaches were right behind the two ICs, and now they're like, oh fuck, they're sticking the charges on the wall to get out, like to put them up to get their hands back on the rifle. And this dude comes flying in, or out, and maybe he got within 2 feet of my mate. And
Everything is starting to go in slow motion for Morgan. He has observed every detail of the scene and knows that his partner is about to be killed by an Islamic State insurgent. He has to act, but from his position there are only a few centimeters separating the ISIS fighter from the American. If the bullet from his rifle deviates slightly, it could end the life of a Delta force. The decision is difficult, but he is aware that if he does not shoot, he will most likely die at the hands of the enemy. Only he can save him, even though the risk is becoming his executioner. Even though an average person would not be able to react in time when faced with this crossroads, Kyle Morgan has been prepared for action, and hesitating is not part of his job.
he's running out with a pistol and like to her head, and like he had no idea we were right there. And before it became more of a thing, like I was able to see that, even just a snapshot of, like, I'm talking 3 or 4 feet of like depth into the room that it came from. I was able to key off that, and then I shot him from the stairwell and essentially in the top of his head.
Kyle has just taken a nearly impossible shot, but the whirlwind of the raid doesn't allow him to stop and think about it. Not even his partner, who was inches from death, does. He'll be able to thank him later, if they both manage to stay alive. By then, chaos has already broken out. The ISIS guards, taken by surprise, respond brutally. The crossfire illuminates the shadows inside the building, and the Deltas advance relentlessly, leaving a few corpses in their wake. They are determined to go after their prey. The Americans move like ghosts in the darkness, fast and lethal, calculating each step. The bullets that are fired have deadly precision, and little by little the enemies are falling. Inside the heart of the complex, Abu Sayyaf tries to resist. The walls rumble as elite operators sweep the rooms, taking down the defenders with terrifying speed. Seeing the overwhelming performance of the Americans, the members of the Islamic State begin to use women and children as human shields. The tactic makes things difficult for the Deltas, who want to avoid harming them. However, their rivals will not hesitate to shoot. In the middle of the fighting, an American soldier finds himself in a room where he sees a large wardrobe. He opens it, and the first thing he discovers inside is a woman, but there is also a brutal surprise hidden there.
He goes to grab, one of my mates goes to grab the female off of, out of there, and then an AK gets shoved in his face, and he like grabs the barrel, and the dude just starts racking rounds off like next to his head. And he's just controlling the muzzle with his own hands now. He's in a wrestling match now.
The Delta Force is fighting with all its might to keep the gun from being aimed at its body. It is completely unprotected until one of its comrades enters the room. Once again, the scene requires surgical precision. This time, the American who is grappling with the ISIS fighter moves in all directions, trying to avoid death. Both are writhing in hand-to-hand combat, but the elite soldier who has just entered does not hesitate in what he must do either. He takes his rifle and shoots. Blood floods the walls and the floor of the entire place. Another insurgent has just died, and the Delta Force suffers no casualties. The end of the battle is approaching. The warlord is cornered, but despite finding himself between a rock and a hard place, Abu Sayyaf decides to fight until the last second. In this way, he sealed his fate. In a fierce exchange, he fell dead under the fire of the American forces. The operation was executed with incredible perfection, the kind of precision that only years of training and experience can achieve. With their main target down, the soldiers moved on to the next phase of the mission, capturing Sayyaf, the wife of the ISIS leader. She is a shadowy figure who played a key role in sexual slavery and the abuse of prisoners, including in the case of Kayla Mueller. When they found her, Sayyaf was captured alive. She had tried to hide, but there was no escape. Her arrest would become a key piece in the collection of valuable intelligence.
The intelligence we got then to capturing his wife and them interrogating her, the Kurds, to pinpointing al-Baghdadi, where we were able to go over and kill him.
As Morgan explained, Sayyaf provided chilling details about the inhumane treatment Kayla Mueller and other women had suffered at the hands of ISIS, revealing the brutality of al-Baghdadi, the organization's top leader. That was in addition to the extensive intelligence gathering that was done on the ground. Documents, computers, and phones were seized. Every piece of technology and paper contained vital secrets, oil trafficking routes, names of accomplices, financial networks. The real treasure was not simply the death of Abu Sayyaf, but the avalanche of data that was now in the hands of American forces. The mission was a resounding success. It meant a crucial blow to the terrorist organization and paved the way for the next one: the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. After arduous work in which all the information obtained was used on October 26, 2019, the Delta Force again took charge of the mission to catch the leader of ISIS. Symbolically, the operation was named after Kayla Mueller. After American forces surrounded al-Baghdadi and he saw no way out, he detonated an explosive vest he was wearing, causing his own death. In this way, the American elite commandos finished off two of the most feared leaders of the Islamic State, responsible for having tortured the young humanitarian worker. However, the battle against ISIS is far from over, and it is almost certain that it will continue to bring brutal episodes like these.
Going in, we knew we were going to make contact.
We were doing special operations raids on any known terrorist that we could find.
But things happen every day that change the plan. Some people need to be killed, and that's how it is.
Year 2006. At the bloodiest point of the Iraq War, an experienced group of US Army Rangers prepares for a high-impact mission. After assassinating Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, Osama bin Laden's right-hand man, the Americans go in search of the new leaders of al-Qaeda. According to intelligence information, the architects of the bloodiest terrorist organization in history are hiding in an area near Bakba, one of the cities with the greatest insurgent activity in the region. The Rangers prepare to carry out a raid in the middle of the night, but they do not know that, just a few kilometers away, the insurgents are waiting for them with a carefully planned ambush. Join us on this shocking adventure through the center of the Iraqi city, the scene of a brutal confrontation where both the elite team and the rebels are feared hunters, but also possible prey. Let's begin.
The first mission, it's a little frightening, but once you get that first one under your belt, it's game on after that.
In the midst of the most brutal conflict of the Cold War, a sinister group emerged in the mountains of Afghanistan. Led by Osama bin Laden, al-Qaeda was born in 1988 as an organization of religious fanatics determined to impose their version of Islam at any cost. Forged in the fires of the Afghan resistance against the Soviet Union, these warriors would stop at nothing in their mission to sow global chaos. And boy, would the United States suffer the consequences. Al-Qaeda was quick to show its terrifying capacity for evil. On September 11, 2001, bin Laden perpetrated the most terrible terrorist attack in history. 4 planes hijacked by his followers were converted into guided missiles, destroying the towers and striking at the heart of American military power at the Pentagon. In a single day, al-Qaeda turned the skies of New York into a smoking hell, claiming the lives of nearly 3,000 innocent people. The attack unleashed a relentless fury on the part of the United States, which vowed to avenge the deaths of its citizens and dismantle bin Laden's empire of terror. Afghanistan and Iraq, the sanctuaries of al-Qaeda, were razed in a firestorm as American special forces unleashed a hunt for the terrorist leader, whether alive or dead. Another of the United States targets was Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Born in Jordan on October 30, 1966, as Ahmed Fadl al-Khalaileh, he was forged in the darkness of the prisons and battlefields of the Middle East. When he joined al-Qaeda, no one could have imagined that this man would become one of the most brutal and feared terrorists of the 21st century. As the organization's leader in Iraq, he was credited with some of the most gruesome and ruthless acts of violence in the Iraqi insurgency that followed the US invasion in 2003. His attacks were not only directed against foreign forces. Zarqawi unleashed a wave of sectarian violence, bombing mosques, beheading prisoners on camera, and unleashing a bloodbath that brought Iraq to the brink of civil war. Under his command, al-Qaeda became the symbol of the most extreme horror. His psychological terror tactics, which included suicide attacks and public assassinations, not only shook Iraq, but inspired organizations around the world. Zarqawi transformed terrorism into a horror spectacle, a propaganda tool that would continue to be used by his successors, such as the Islamic State, also nicknamed ISIS. However, Zarqawi's reign could not last forever. On June 7, 2006, after an intense manhunt, US forces finally located him in a remote hideout in Iraq. An airstrike ended his life, but not his legacy of terror. Al-Qaeda was looking for new leaders, and the United States wanted to avoid a transfer of power among his heirs. This is how our story begins, and to do so we must return to our protagonists, the elite corps of the Rangers.
We were bringing the fight to the bad guys, and we were doing special operations raids on any known terrorist that we could find. Sometimes we would get back from a mission, put our stuff down, only to put it right back on, because we were going back out again.
That was the extreme climate in Iraq after Zarqawi was killed weeks ago. That death shook the leadership structure of al-Qaeda, and many members are looking to be the next Zarqawi. The Americans know this and are after the heads of the new leaders of al-Qaeda. Intelligent men, constantly on the move in the desert and therefore dangerous and difficult to find. The United States needs special soldiers to fight in this battle, an elite combat force. We are talking about none other than the Rangers, and in this case, the 3rd Battalion of the 75th Regiment. Before their missions, one of the tough fighters says a little prayer, asking God to keep him and his team safe. It is a silent and effective ritual, which keeps them in high spirits in every operation, every night and every day. Above all, in a situation of maximum risk and in the middle of a city populated by civilians. The objectives have been defined and the team knows that there is a lot at stake. Nothing less than capturing terrorist leaders who seek to continue the legacy of Al-Qaeda. The Rangers can withstand great pressure and perform extreme tasks without breaking a sweat. But they are not prepared for what will happen that night. A twist of fate will bring them into a fierce and unexpected combat.
I took the lead walking out. I can remember walking through fields and some light forest and a lot of farmland, and we landed quite a ways away.
We did have to walk distance. I mean, that was mostly for the element of surprise. We wanted to make sure that when we hit them hard.
It's early morning in the town of Bakba, 50 kilometers from Baghdad. Alex goes ahead to lead the rest of the group. They have to cut through fences and wires to advance, moving through dense forest while trying to remain as silent as possible. They know that a mistake could jeopardize the mission, even injure or end the life of one of them. No one wants that on their conscience. They'd rather die than make one of their comrades suffer by mistake. At one point, they hear a loud bang. They don't know where it's coming from and wonder if they're missing something crucial.
As we got closer, I heard this loud noise. And I was just like, is that something somebody's not telling us or something's going on? So as we got up to the chicken coop, we noticed what the noise was, and it was a generator. Really loud, too. And we're just like, wow, that was pure luck.
As they approach the objective where the insurgent leaders were hiding, which included the chicken coop and other surrounding buildings, they discover that the sound is coming from a generator that, by a stroke of luck, has camouflaged their progress. As a sniper circles one of the buildings, he is exposed to an insurgent guard defending the place. Although the man has his back turned and does not notice his presence, Hal informs the platoon sergeant that they are ready to begin the plan. They know that time is of the essence. They must go into action immediately and launch into combat. Suddenly, they sense other presences and decide to take the chicken coop. The group forms a large circle around the building, approaching the back where the enemies are. The soldiers advance slowly, trying to stay focused and sharp-minded in the face of any strange movement. They reach a staircase and realize that the guard has not yet discovered that they are there. But something is not right. That calm begins to feel strangely dangerous. The terrorist seems to know something else. He sits on the edge and looks around. The platoon sergeant gives the green light to eliminate the guard before he can act. They have no idea what is about to happen. Everyone is at their posts, ready for action. It is up to the sniper to pull the trigger to start the operation.
The snipers were set up in buildings directly across from us, right at about 100 meters away. They had a really good vantage point of the whole chicken coop area where the bad guys are.
Platoon sergeant called up. He's like, hey, everybody's set. So the other sniper and I, we did a 3-2-1 at the same time and shot target.
Boom. The guard is eliminated by a well-aimed hit and falls from the roof. However, the shot alerts the other insurgents inside the chicken coop, and the element of surprise no longer plays in the Rangers' favor. They then proceed to direct confrontation, and within a few minutes they eliminate at least 4 terrorists. There are 7 more enemies on the roof. One of the American snipers is aiming about 2 inches below a guard's eyes, right in the center of his head. But suddenly, the squad leader calls for a momentary halt in the shooting. He grabs a grenade and throws it at the roof. This explosion will start a new phase of the attack. Now it is time for the other part of the team to go up to the roof.
I need to shift my guys to cover the rest of the guys going on that rooftop as quickly as possible.
What we didn't know was that the grenade lodged underneath a water tank, and water is a great way to absorb impact. So that grenade did nothing but maybe gave us a little bit of element of shock or something, but the downside is kind of told them that we were coming up on the roof.
The soldiers enter the roof and engage the terrorists as quickly as they can. They know that time is a key factor in preventing the al-Qaeda men from regrouping. The firefight quickly escalates, and the Rangers discover that the enemy still has a lot of firepower. The insurgents also have magazines organized in a way that allows very fast changes from one to the other, giving them a key advantage. Everything is happening fleetingly, in a matter of seconds. The Rangers know that the danger is now extreme. More Iraqi forces are approaching from behind the chicken coop. The soldiers are not sure how much firepower they will have to face. They only feel the footsteps between the darkness and the siege of a constant gunfire. The group stops in front of a heavy main door. The specialists assess that it does not seem to be easily knocked down. The soldiers try several times to force it open manually without success. They then take the easy way, a charge to detonate the door. An explosion occurs and a cloud covers the scene.
I was the first one through the door, but I couldn't see anything. I saw just the cloud of the explosion still. And so there was like debris, chickens everywhere. I wasn't expecting that many chickens in the coop. It was disgusting. There was chicken poo everywhere. It smelled horrible. I thought I was gonna walk away with some kind of disease.
Among the rubble of the chicken coop, the Rangers have to kick these defenseless animals to be able to advance through the space. Suddenly, they spot an enemy hiding behind some chickens. The man tries to go unnoticed, but a Ranger detects him and successfully eliminates him. Within a few minutes, the al-Qaeda fanatics are suffering significant casualties. Suddenly, the Rangers receive information from the base announcing more problems. The villagers have left the city and are heading towards their position, alerted by the insurgents. The Rangers must establish a surveillance cordon. Some support helicopters appear and surround the place, armed with machine guns and rockets, flying at very low altitude to extend their range of fire. This air protection is key for the Americans in this instance, since it frightens and eventually eliminates any combatant who dares to approach the place.
As this little bird was doing gun runs, they're engaging targets, guys coming out of the village. There's a loud boom. I see blue sparks everywhere.
One of the Little Bird helicopters caught telephone lines that you obviously couldn't see in the dark.
And when it did that, it set off all the rockets in the pods.
In a sudden twist in the story, one of the helicopters goes down. Will it be another tragedy for the American forces? Fortunately for them, the pilots are smart and experienced enough to crash land in a safe place. Despite their concern for their comrades, the Rangers could only think about holding back the enemy fire, which was becoming more intense. The platoon sergeant immediately radios and contacts one of the regiment leaders to send a team. A quick rescue maneuver must be carried out, but they are not going to abandon the crashed pilots, so the Rangers head to the position where the helicopter landed before it is hit by the enemy. In the distance, gunfire and increasing activity can be heard. It is evident that the terrorists are regrouping and trying to approach the position. The Rangers arrive at the scene first and provide medical attention to the pilots. The men are battered but safe, which is a relief for the Americans. As we see, these soldiers know how to deal with eventualities calmly and effectively, transforming the apparent chaos into a situation under control, at least momentarily. The Rangers manage to escape the place before the enemy attacks them, but the battle continues in the streets. Since there are still villagers trying to enter the fight, the danger for the Americans increases. The local citizens may not be experts in weapons, but their extreme fanaticism makes them lethally dangerous. Therefore, controlling the insurgent village becomes key. One of the American snipers is located at a high point, so he has a privileged view of a main house.
I saw personnel coming in and out of a main house, and it was the decision by higher-ups to see what's inside that house.
The objective has changed dramatically. Now it is a matter of finding out who was inside the house. The snipers abandon their positions and head towards the village.
We regrouped, and then we went into the village. A lot of people hide out in those average towns, you know. You overlook them. There's a main building we're gonna go to, and, you know, everybody had their position, what they're supposed to do, and then we went into the city.
Exhausted after a quick but very intense operation, the Rangers storm the village, meticulously clearing building after building, until they reach the main house. As they go through the different rooms, they surprise a man who was desperately trying to escape. He's missing 2 fingers, and a grotesque crater opens in his chin, surely caused by the relentless machine gun fire of the helicopter that was flying over the area. The soldiers do not execute this surviving terrorist because they need him as an informant. It is a tragic situation, meeting someone who has no more reason to stay alive and yet refuses to die. But the Rangers also go through a delicate balance. Each step is a dance with the darkness, and each corner a challenge to destiny. The bravery of these soldiers mixes with fear, and adrenaline becomes the blood that runs through their veins. Alex, one of the snipers, is positioned on the roof and spots an insurgent on the roof of a building, about 75 meters away. He is a dangerous target. Alex warns over the radio system and decides to deal with the man.
Some people need to be killed, and that's how it is. You know, that's just how the world is. You know, there's social taboos that say it's bad, but really, I mean, they're just people that need to go away. And most people are not comfortable with that. The other sniper now did a 3-2-1 shot.
The terrorists are being picked off one by one. Darkness is a perfect refuge for the stealthy Rangers, a cloak of shadows where they can move like true ghosts. In this world of shadows, the enemy is blind, but the American soldiers see clearly. Their steps are sure and their hearts keep beating calm, because darkness is not their enemy, but their most faithful ally. Meanwhile, night begins to give way to daylight, which seems to announce the end.
We were waiting around for exfil, and I remember this low-flying fighter jet that just came down. It was like a nosedive, and it must have flown, I mean, I felt like I could touch it. It was a very surreal feeling. It was like, this is the path to exfil.
These soldiers' ability to turn adversity into advantage, no matter how insurmountable the circumstances seem, reflects a tactical mastery and unwavering courage that distinguishes them as true elite warriors who dominate the battlefield with unstoppable efficiency. However, darkness is not just a way to cover up the actions of law enforcement. Al-Qaeda is more than a terrorist group. It is a symbol of evil that continues to lurk in the shadows, ready to strike when the world least expects it. So the time has come to say goodbye. Thank you very much for staying with us until the end of the video. We look forward to meeting you again in our next installment of Military Force. Until next time.